Hello, happy Monday, and welcome to Reading the Bible is Easy-ish, the podcast video series where each week we look at another text of the Bible with zero preparation and spend just 5 minutes talking about it to see what we can have. I am Harrison Litzel, and today with me I have Tierney Jordan. Tierney, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to see you again. Tierney and I met at McAfee, where we were students together. I think our first class together was History of Christianity, if I remember correctly. And so we spent some time together on like Tuesdays and Thursdays at 9:30. Just a great time to be thinking about thousands of years of history. Tierney, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? Where are you at? What are you doing?
Yeah, so I am originally from Macon, Georgia. I currently live in Stockbridge. I am a minister at the Faith Community Atlanta. I have my own podcast that I do called Sassy Conversations. And yeah, so that's a little bit about me and what I got going on in the world.
All right. And Tierney, you just graduated from McAfee with your MDiv this past May. So congratulations on that. And you are now our second minister from the faith community on the podcast. So it's starting to be a trend with us. We had Christian on a few weeks ago. And so we're appreciative to you for joining us. So Tierney, tell us, when you read the Bible, what tools, what habits, what is it like for you when you read the Bible?
So when I'm reading the Bible, I normally start with the New Revised Standard Version and then explore other translations after reading that one as foundation. And I kind of like highlight and underline words that stand out to me the most and just sit with those first before reading any commentaries or anything like that. And then after I kind of sit with the words that stand out to me, I'll read, I have the Africana Bible commentary, the Women's Bible commentary. And so those are a few of the ones I go to first and then kind of just go from there.
All right. Yeah. I have to ask, when you say you highlight, do you write in your physical Bible? Is that something that you do?
Yes, so I have a physical Bible that I write in, and then of course, if I'm doing it online, the apps have the cool ways where you can highlight and underline in there too. So
That's right.
a little bit
Yeah.
of both.
I've gone back and forth in my life on writing in the Bible. I think my grandmother, when I was a kid, told me not to do it, and so I didn't do it for the longest time. But some I do, some I don't. I also love buying used Bibles that have other people's writing in them. I worked at a thrift store for a while, and they would throw away Bibles that had writing in them, and I would take them home. And so I have this kind of stack of Bibles with random people's devotions and things, and it's one of my favorite things. So I love to meet somebody else who does that. So for today, our Bible passage that we have done zero preparation for comes from the lectionary for this week. We are going to look at Mark chapter 6, verses 14 through 29. Tierney, as you said, you start out with the NRSV, so we'll go ahead and start with that here as well. So I will read the passage for us, and then we'll spend 5 minutes seeing what we can do with it. So this is Mark chapter 6, verses 14 through 29. King Herod heard of it, for Jesus' name had become known. Some were saying John the Baptizer has been raised from the dead, and for this reason these powers are at work in him. But others said it is Elijah, and others said it is a prophet, like one of the prophets of old. But when Herod heard of it, he said, John, whom I beheaded, has been raised. For Herod himself had sent men who arrested John, bound him, and put him in prison on account of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because Herod had married her. For John had been telling Herod, it is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. And Herodias had a grudge against him and wanted to kill him, but she could not. For Herod feared John, knowing that he was a righteous and holy man, and he protected him. When he heard him, he was greatly perplexed, and yet he liked to listen to him. But an opportunity came when Herod, on his birthday, gave a banquet for his courtiers and officers and for the leaders of Galilee. When his daughter Herodias came in and danced, she pleased Herod and his guests, and the king said to the girl, ask me for whatever you wish, and I will give it. And he solemnly swore to her, whatever you ask me, I will give you, even half of my kingdom. She went out and said to her mother, what should I ask for? She replied, the head of John the Baptizer. Immediately she rushed back to the king and requested, I want you to give me at once the head of John the Baptizer on a platter. The king was deeply grieved, yet out of regard for his oaths and for the guests, he did not want to refuse her. Immediately the king sent a soldier of the guard with orders to bring John's head. He went and beheaded him in prison, brought his head on a platter and gave it to the girl. Then the girl gave it to her mother. When the disciples heard about it, they came and took his body and laid it in a tomb. So that is Mark chapter 6, 14 through 29. I'm going to set a timer for us for 5 minutes. So Tierney, what words or phrases stood out to you? What would you have highlighted or underlined there?
So he was greatly perplexed in verse 20 stood out to me. I don't know why, but as you were going through it, it's like he was greatly perplexed. That stood out. And then we got prophet in here a couple of times. So I would highlight that because of the repetition. And then the part where the girl went back and asked her mother what she should ask for, something about that stood out to me because of the ways that we oftentimes ask other people for permission in circumstances when we don't necessarily know what to do. So that's what came up for me at first.
Yeah. So you said prophet in that repetition, and I noticed that as well. When you hear prophet, what do you think of? What does it make you think of when John is called the prophet?
So in my church tradition, I have an eerie feeling, like I have an eerie relationship with the word prophet, just because of the way that it's been used in church sometimes. But thinking about it in this context, I'm thinking about people who know things that would not otherwise be known unto them, and how that would be relatable to this story. So it's like, well, did you know you were about to die? Did you know you were about to be beheaded? What significance does us knowing you're a prophet right here have to the context of the entire story?
Yeah, that's good. Wondering about what John knew and how he was feeling sitting in that cell. It's interesting to me that this story is told in the past tense, right? That we start out with this kind of framing of Herod being the one who killed John, and we kind of go back in time. I don't think that happens very often and especially in Mark. I just think of Mark as one event right after the other, kind of keeps going, keeps moving quickly, and this feels like this kind of pause and kind of a move backward in time. And I'm interested in that framing. And yeah, thinking about John the prophet sitting there in jail, that is something to think about.
Yeah, because we get this short little preview, like the cliff notes of the story, and then we get the more detailed version, which is, like you said, really interesting.
Yeah, I feel like thinking about like textual criticism, thinking about how the book of Mark came together. I feel like there are people who would say maybe the story was added by another author or something like that. I'm not a Markan scholar or a Greek scholar by any means, but I can see that being a part of the conversation. Yeah, I'm struck by in this story. I feel like when studying history, there are so many events that feel like big world altering events, and then sometimes when you hear the story, it's just happenstance. Like it wasn't a big deal when it happened. It was this small event and this small event and this small event, and it changed everything. And that's kind of what I was struck by here is John the Baptizer. It's John the Baptist, this name that we know that's said in churches year after year after year, and he was killed at a party because of a off the cuff promise and a girl who asked her mom's permission, and all of a sudden he's dead. And it's interesting to me that kind of, again, these big huge events that come from just small interactions between people that led to this man's death.
Yeah, and it's funny, the stories that become the most popular, because as I'm thinking about like the stories that I've always learned as like the big Bible stories, this isn't one of them. So like the way that John the Baptist life ended is not something that people are like, okay, well, this is how this happened. And so that says a lot about like, the things that we think are important and should be taught the most about, that we harp on, because this isn't one of those like, oh yeah, I know that Bible story type
Right.
of stories, right?
Yeah. And as you say that, I think also though, I was probably introduced to the story way too young. Like this is one of those stories that it's violent, right? Like it's nothing about this is child friendly. Yeah, but I'm sure I heard this story as a child, and it was just a part of what I was taught in church. And it's amazing to me sometimes working in children's ministry, working with children, coming across different curriculums and things like that, and just seeing like the stories that just because we're in the Bible, we're like, of course we're going to tell these to our children. But if this was a movie today, like not at all connected to the Bible, like I wouldn't take my kid to see this movie. There's no way. Like it's nothing about it is something I want to share with a child.
I think sometimes we forget that the Bible is not G-rated. So like all of the texts in here, we should have some PG, we should have some PG-13. We got some, what's the NC-17 and
That's
R-rated.
right.
Like it's levels to this. This is not a one size fits all. So this is definitely one of those, at least PG-13, just because of the violence that you see within this story. So
yeah, I'm also just, it's interesting as I think about the book of Mark and the way that these stories go. I think that, I mean, Herodias is one of the few named women in the Gospel of Mark, I believe. There's a few others. I know at the end of the Gospel of Mark, a few of the women are named, and it kind of says they were with Jesus the whole time. And so there's these kind of ways in which women are intertwined into the story. But this episode has two women featured heavily in it. And it's interesting that this is the story where their names are given, when so often the biblical text, it just says the woman or describes the woman and never actually gives them a name. But the authors thought it was important for us to know these names as it comes to the death of John the Baptizer.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and the similarities in the names stood out to me as well. Herod, Herodias, we got a lot of, I don't know, alliteration. I don't know if there's something there, but
yeah. Well, that's 5 minutes. That's all the time that we have. So if you're going to spend a little bit more time with this text this week, what are you going to spend a little bit more time on? What grabbed your attention? What are you going to come back to?
If I were to come back, I would be around verse 23 and 24. That something about the part where she goes back to ask her mother for permission, something about it is just standing out to me. And the little bit of Greek that I do know, I'd be going in there, looking through some words and figuring out exactly how that plays into the larger picture of the Markan narrative and exactly where we are within the story.
Yeah, I like that. Let's see, if I'm going to spend a little bit more time with this, I feel like I need to freshen up a little bit on who Herod was. I feel like in my different levels of education, I always learn a little bit about why he's in charge and what puts him here, and all the different Herod and Herodias and Philip and all these different people. And I think I just kind of need to go back and revisit that again, because again, he's just one character in this story, just this one guy at this one time who had such a big impact on our faith in the way that we understand who we are today as Jesus followers. And I feel like I need to freshen up on that information a little bit.
Yeah, and which part of his career he's in, right? Because he has so many different levels of impact. It's like,
yeah, that's right. Yeah. All right, so that's it for this passage. That's it for this. So Tierney, again, thank you so much for joining us. If folks want to connect with you a little bit more, where can they find your work?
Oh, sure. So you can connect with me on Facebook at Tierney Jordan. I'm on Instagram at I am Tierney J. And then my podcast on Instagram is Sassy Soul Pod. So yeah, I'm in all of those places.
All right. Thank you again for joining us. Everybody, make sure to check out Tierney and all those different places. She is a great friend, a great Bible scholar, and I've really enjoyed the chance to get to know her. And I'm glad that she took some time to be here with us this week. As we come to the end of this video, make sure to like and subscribe to tell your friends about Reading the Bible is Easy-ish. And until we see you again, keep on reading the Bible. Bye, everybody.